Hello, everyone. It's Rosemary with Good Journeys Tarot, and shortly I'll be talking about the Thoth Tarot and what I think it's good for. Before we get started, though, I thought I would just tell you about some things that are going on that are new while we see if people pop in today for our live. I'm having coffee out of my pug mug. I actually don't have a lot of mugs. Usually you'll see me drinking out of my witch's cauldron. But this was a gift from one of my neighbors one year, and I kept it. A couple of things happening this week. One is I did finally dye my hair again, the lovely gray that I love. It'll be yellow again in a few weeks. No worries. Because it fades so fast. Also, I got my helix pierced, so I'm excited about. See, this mirror image thing is getting me, so I was excited about that. I had a new 10 come in and in here is my Centennial deck. I previously had my Centennial stored in this big wooden box, and this is actually a symbol that I had created early on in my tarot journey. And it's one of two boxes now that I have. This one, which I didn't like the way it came out, has my study deck in it. And then this one now with my Centennial that's kind of on a parchment. It's supposed to be a more yellow tan parchment, but it looks really gray when it printed. I haven't quite figured out how to make playing cards to do what I want it to do, because the borders and the colors are not the same on their website as they are when they print. I don't know what that's about. Also this week I got some new pens, which I'm excited about. I actually ran out of my gold pen, which I use a lot in my planner and when I'm journaling and stuff. And when I went to buy it, I could only find it in like packs of like a dozen or more. But I kept seeing it with these silver and the white pen. I've never had a white pen. I've had white out, but now I just love it. I'm writing on everything with the white pen, right? Even my notes for the broadcast today. Also this week, I got in this deck. It's the Oracle, the 2-penny Oracle by Madame Clara Seasall. And I got the round version. And the thing about this deck is that while it does have images on it, it's mostly keywords. And I have found that I have really enjoyed working with this deck this week. And more so than a lot of the Oracle decks that I've tried. In fact, I've tried numerous Oracle decks, and to this day, I still haven't found an Oracle deck that I like working with the tarot, though I do utilize a couple of Oracle decks for like meditative purposes. Usually they just don't speak to me. The keywords usually are, to me, not related to the images, even though the images are beautiful on Oracle decks. So all that being said, why don't we jump in and talk a little bit about the Thoth? What is it good for? Most people say absolutely nothing, which that's not true. People have preferences, right, about decks. So you have some people who only read RWS, you have some people who read only Thoth, and you have some people who only read the Marseille. And one of the things that surprised me and shocked me, I kind of knew that people had preferences, but there are actually people out there, like this guy right here, who think that there's only one true tarot, right? Well, we're not going to know what that original tarot deck looked like, and it was most likely not used for divination. And so I say we use what works. And that's how I approach it. And there are a couple of approaches to reading the tarot, right? So Kelly did a great live about this last week or the week before on Kelly Bear's channel about how people read the tarot. Some people will come up with their meanings for the cards, and regardless of what deck they read, they read it that way. Some people will read each and every deck differently based on the author's preferences. So like you read RWS the way Waite wrote it, you read Thoth the way it was written, you read Marseille, in the Marseille style. And then other people will just use their intuition to work with the images in the cards. I do a little bit of all of it, and that's why I studied the Thoth. I enjoy finding things in the cards that are unique and interesting, and learning from them the messages that they have for that specific card, whether it be the suit and number, or it be a major arcana or a cart card, and that I can apply to my readings with any deck. Because ultimately, all of the same information is there. The image just evokes a specific part of that meaning. At least that's my perspective. So why study the Thoth? Well, one, it's going to give you a better understanding of the Golden Dawn. Both the RWS and the Thoth are out of the Golden Dawn. And basically, they just took two different approaches. One focuses on Christian mysticism. One focuses on removing the Christian mysticism. And the other thing that's different, which I learned watching Will from Atypical Tarot's course on Thoth, is that while Waite tried to create a deck that was accessible to an extent and understandable to the largest majority of people, Aleister Crowley's goal was to include as much symbolism as possible. And so while they grew out of the same school, the images are very different, and that was their intention. Just like it was the intention of ABC author to create their deck the way that they did. So one of the other things about studying this deck is going to be that you're going to get a lot more information about symbols that appear throughout the tarot, not just in this deck, but in other decks as well. You're also going to actually get a better picture of correspondences. There are a lot of symbols in here for correspondences that don't appear in Waite's deck. In fact, I've been re-looking at the pictorial key to the tarot by Waite, and Waite did not discuss most of the correspondent associations that we have with the tarot today. Most of those actually come from the Thoth. And while people say they don't study the Thoth, they study all these correspondences like the Tree of Life and like the Zodiac, etc., that are not actually talked about in here. He mentions the Kabbalah maybe 3 or 4 times in passing about certain cards, but he does not mention the Zodiac in here at all that I have found. So that's reason 2 for studying the Thoth. You're going to learn more about symbols in tarot, and as well as the Golden Dawn. It also gives you a better, to me, picture of the universe of the tarot than, say, the RWS does, because it includes so much information. And everything is connected in this deck in a way that sometimes the RWS is not. Throughout, you get a better picture of the universe as a whole. I know a lot of people don't want to study this deck because they say it's just overwhelming. Another reason a lot of people don't study the deck is because they say Aleister Crowley was a horrible human being. Well, the same can be said of lots of people. There are things about this author which have come to light since I purchased this book, which make a lot of people not want to buy his book. But there's still valuable information here, just like there is valuable information in this deck. And I'm going to say something in a general way that people who love the Thoth are going to balk at, and they're going to say, what? And probably some RWS people too. But the truth is that because these are out of the same school, for the most part, this deck and this deck are the same. Okay, this one chooses to focus on specific aspects of the cards, and this one on other general aspects of the cards. But ultimately, probably 72 of the cards are identical in meaning and function. They just have different levels of symbology and approached the cards in a different way. The cards that are completely different are, of course, the princes from this deck and the kings from this deck. There's no relationship there at all. And that's one of the things that I'm struggling with this deck is the princes. I really don't understand their place in this deck. But all of the other court cards, to some extent, relate. Now, while the princesses in this deck, i.e. the pages in this deck, take on completely different roles in the tarot universe that they are describing, they ultimately have similar meanings and functions. And that's a generalization. Again, I am learning the Thoth. I am not an expert in the Thoth. I don't pretend to be an expert in the Thoth. I'm giving you my impressions like I would of any other deck that I've studied or read. So let's talk about the 8 and 11 thing. Let's talk about justice and strength, or lust and adjustment, for a minute, because I know that's something that comes up a lot when you talk about the Thoth, especially when you've been studying with the RWS. So the interesting thing is that Waite never attempts to explain his decision. He says, I switched them for reasons that are meaningful to me. And usually I would just balk at that, and I'll get to that about the Crowley deck in a minute. There's some things I balk about because that's basically his approach. He just says, oh, I had a vision that confirms this. And I'm like, can you make that relevant based on other facts or information? The fact you had a vision doesn't do it for me, right? But in Benabel Wynn's Book of Maps for the Spirit Keepers Tarot, she does a 3-4 page discussion of this change and what it appears that the two authors did. And so for Waite, it appears that he attempted to put the cards in order by zodiac, because with justice at 8, the zodiac's out of order. And Crowley left it as was in the Tarot de Marseille, and then he explained it with what we call this double loop. And I'm not a huge fan of it. I just because his rationale was that he had a vision that confirmed that this was correct, that the tarot operated this way. And while it kind of makes sense when you draw it out on paper, I prefer things that are cyclical or linear. And so for me, justice makes more sense at 11, where the zodiac is in order. And also, I feel like the Hebrew alphabet is in a better order too. So I kind of disagree with Crowley on that change. But one of the things that Benabel Wynn discussed that I found interesting is that those changes reflect a difference in their view of the world of your inner temple. So whereas Waite was integrating everything in both your public and your spiritual life. In the Thoth deck, Crowley tried to separate those two things. So, and I'm not going to go into details about that. If you have this book, it's on page 158, and you can read about that. But basically, in the Thoth deck, by moving justice to 8, it changes the worldview, i.e. integrating the church and state, i.e. the whole world, as part of your inner temple, versus that separating it is what Crowley did. So Crowley wanted to keep it specifically spiritual, and the spiritual is separate from the world outside, or the church and state separation, as we might call it. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the idea of separation of church and state in reality, but as far as like a spiritual system, as far as a inner workings kind of system, I think it's important to integrate your spirituality with your life and the way you live. Some of that sense, I think the RWS makes a little more sense in its order. And again, speaking at a very high level about these things. I actually originally took out a whole bunch of cards to show you guys the differences in some of them. But I think I'm just going to talk about a couple. Because you've seen the cards, and if you're actually interested in the Thoth after this video, you're going to go and you're going to study it. And I'll tell you some of the cards I like. So I prefer this interpretation of the Fool from a meaning standpoint, i.e. this Fool has all the things necessary to succeed. The essence of everything is there. It's a matter of what you do with it going forward. It does symbolize a little bit of risk there, but mostly it's the potential that it is representing. And I think that in this card, we miss a little bit of the potential because we are so focused on the risk. This person right there at the precipice. Okay, there's no path to a brighter future. There's no the existence of everything, the potential, right? And somebody would say, well, that's because the cosmic egg is in the bag. Well, you don't see the cosmic egg, so the potentiality is missing to me in this image. I think had this been against like a background of a valley with like path going through it or something, that maybe it would show the potentiality better, which is something that's important to me in the Fool card. Let's look at Temperance for a second. I wanted to look at some other decks that integrated Thoth to talk about it, but you'll see here this card is very much about alchemy. It is called Art. And I still don't quite comprehend why he chose art, but I get the whole alchemy thing. And that was and that's something that comes across in this card too, even though it's named Temperance instead of Art. The Urban Tarot decided to integrate these. So it called the card Art. It shows an artist, but it actually depicts the RWS card there. So I love this interpretation. This is probably one of my favorite Temperance/Art cards. One of the things, another way that decks tend to try to integrate the RWS and the Thoth is, for example, using imagery from both decks. So you'll see here the Thoth. All right, this is completion. The Four of Wands, which is often celebration or that type of thing. And we get some of that celebration and completion in this image from the RWS. Okay, but it's less pippish. In her deck, the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, Benebell Wynn integrated those. So you'll see the couple there celebrating, but you also see that image from the Thoth there. And you get some of that in the Urban Tarot where they try to integrate it. And it was really that integration of the RWS and Thoth that I saw in different decks, particularly the Spirit Keeper's Tarot, and then again in the Urban Tarot, which got me interested in the Thoth. Another great example of how this was done in Benebell Wynn's deck was the Four of Pentacles or Four of Discs. So, and it's called Power here. And And this is supposed to be a fortress, basically. And all of the elements are represented. So, and then here you have this guy, which we've always, some people will like look at it and go, oh, he's greedy. But really, it's about power. It's about holding on to what you have and making the best use of it. And so you'll see him sitting there before the city, holding on to his money. Here, Benabel Wynn has integrated that, right? So she's got an image of a being holding on to the orbs, but then also the imagery from the Thoth. And so you can see in her deck how the decks were very similar. They have the same ultimate meanings, even though one focuses on certain keywords over the other. And here's the interesting thing. Crowley came up with his keywords for his cards. He says by integrating the suit, the zodiac, the planetary correspondences, and the tree of life, I think it is. Let's see. I can't put my hand on the book because I've been reading it in another room. And I haven't quite figured out how he got those words from associating all of those things from the correspondences, but the key words make sense. And if you look at reference materials for the RWS, then you will find those same words. And if you look at reference materials for the Thoth at keywords, you're going to find the same keywords that you find in the RWS book. So because they're both from the Golden Dawn. So ultimately, for me, the Thoth has been about learning more about what was part of the Golden Dawn. That where did Waite come from when he created his deck versus where did Crowley come from, and being able to say, okay, yes, they're not that different. They are similar. Just the artwork is different. The approach is different, but it's the same tarot. Some people go way further into it than I do. I see people now reading other books by Crowley. Not something I'm probably going to do. I am studying the Tree of Life and some other things that are associated with the deck for better understanding of the tarot as a whole and as of a complete system. But I'm not going to be delving into all of Crowley's writings to gain any better understanding of him at this point. I'm just not interested. I think I've learned as much as I'm going to learn from Lon Milo Duquette's book, Lon Duquette's book, which I'm saying his name wrong, and from Will's class. That I'm going to learn. And I've probably learned more than I'm articulating effectively today here in this time that we've got together. But I do enjoy seeing these decks integrated. So not just the Spirit Keepers Tarot or the Urban Tarot, which I love by Robin Scott, but it also happens in other decks. There's this deck, the Lost Hollow Tarot, actually has 2 card 8s and 2 card 11s. So you can read it as either RWS or Thoth. The images aren't either RWS or Thoth. They are unique to this deck and much more based, I think, in a pagan imagery than either the Egyptian or Christian imagery that you see in these 2 decks. Yeah, I was kind of hoping that there would be people around to ask questions or make comments, and it would bring out some other conversation about Crowley's deck. But ultimately for me, I'm treating it like every other tarot deck. I am studying what the intent of the deck was and the images of the deck and seeing what it contributes to my practice and what I don't like about the deck. So it's no different for me personally than studying the Bone, Stone, and Earth Flash or studying the Urban Tarot or studying the Crystal Unicorn Tarot for that matter. I just want to learn about the deck. I'm not interested in the author themselves and what things they may have done that people don't approve of. I'm just interested in seeing what the deck has to contribute to my practice. And I think that the Thoth has a lot to contribute. If you're willing to sit down and say, read a book, probably not the Book of Thoth. I've tried several times and I am never going to make it through that book. But a good book like the Lon Milo Duquette book, or even a class like the one Will did at Tarot Readers Academy will give you a basic understanding of the deck and how it's structured and the symbols in it. And I think that once you are able to see what's actually in the cards, you'll appreciate it more. I know that I have. One of the reasons that I struggle with this deck for so long is because the images are so detailed. There's so much going on in these cards. For me, I find it difficult to read cards like that. I actually have some other decks that, for me, are difficult to read with for that same reason. There's too much going on in the cards. And but I'm glad that I've taken the time over the last several months to study the deck, to learn more about it, and get information into my head about the deck, because it's really going to grow my practice and benefit me as I study other decks, because many decks do tend to add from various other sources when they create their cards. So when you see a card in say the Bonestone and Earthflesh, for example, there are cards in there where the Thoth comes through to me much more than the RWS. One example of that is actually the Fool card, where it's all about the potential of everything being there and taking the step forward to take advantage of it, which for me is ultimately what the Fool is about, and not so much about risk as many people read that card. All right, well, I'm going to stop right there. I hope that you guys will share your thoughts on the Thoth and what it's good for, and that you will ask questions, make comments. I would love to do some lives with some other people. If you have a particular topic you want to chat about for a little while one Sunday morning, let me know, and I'll be glad to spend some time with you. Until next time, guys, good journeys.